In my Visual Studio C++ project, I am deleting all the methods which I added previously to test if the library is working. I do not need those methods anymore. It's time to add the web server code which I downloaded from GitHub and GitLab repository earlier. I do not need all the files, I only need headers and CPP files. Just in case, I am going through each subfolder to ensure there are no files which may be needed. I will skip this make file. The reason is, if it's present in my project, then Visual Studio will use it to look up dependencies and fail. I will be adding dependencies to Visual Studio manually. Be aware of this issue if you are building from a repository directly. You need to tell CMake where your dependencies are. I am selecting each HPP and CPP files. Apologies, you cannot see the bottom of my Windows Explorer. Every HPP and CPP files. Those files will be copied to my Visual Studio project. Here I can see that when I created my Visual Studio project, it added another directory with the same name. I have two directories named Simple Web Server. I will do a bit of refactoring. I will move my project directory and then delete the duplicate, so I do not have duplicate directories. I will close my Visual Studio before I move the project directory. And now I have my project directory where it should be. I will click of the solution file to load and to ensure it's still valid. I am copying all HPP and CPP files from the repository project into my Visual Studio project directory. To make those available for Visual Studio, I need to add those to my project. Right-click, then Add Existing Item. Browse to the files and select what you want to add. Then click the Add button. I will be adding them later, because I want to see what will happen if I do not add those files. I will copy-paste HTTP examples, which were provided by the repositor author, into my test application. I will try those out first to get an idea of how I will use this web server. This example is too big and it also contains features which I will not use, such as JSON and encryption. I want to test only the features which are relevant to my use case. I will be deleting the code I do not need. The header file does not respond to control click. I will fix it later. I am deleting the JSON part. I am keeping get info. I do not need SSH. I am keeping on error handler. I am keeping the server thread. Now for the client part. I need to slightly amend this GET request to go to the info route. And post, it is already posting to the correct route. I do not need the asynchronous client example. Finally, I want to wait for a key press when the server terminates. Building the solution and it cannot find the client header. This is why I needed to add those existing items earlier. The headers and CPP files which I copied from the repository. The using namespace std allows me to drop std prefix and use standard strings without it. The repository author said this project needs boost dependency. I will be adding it now. I am typing boost download in Google. The first link takes me to boost download page. I will be using the latest version, which is 181. I am downloading zip file to my tutorial directory where I keep my projects. And then I will extract it. While it is being downloaded, I am looking for instructions on how to install in on Windows. I found the instructions for one of its old versions, but it should not matter, they are mostly the same. This is the part 1 need. I will run a bootstrap, which will create a B2 executable, and this B2 will install Boost. I am extracting Boost zip. This is the file I will run via the command prompt. It will create an executable to install Boost. This is the B2 executable I will be running now. It will take plenty of time, it is building a lot of libraries both for 32 and 64 bits. I resume when it finishes. The build has finished, and it tells MW the directories where I can find headers and libraries. I will need those directories to configure Visual Studio. I will go into the directories to see what is inside. Those are all header files. Those are all libraries. It generated for 32-bit and 64-bit. I only need 64-bit, so I will be rebuilding it the proper way. This page tells me how to build 64-bit libraries for Windows. I am copy-pasting this line into my command prompt and I will be running B2 again. Make sure you set the correct version here. I need the version my Visual Studio can work with. It's 1.4.3 and it's also what Boost initially generated. I am deleting the stage directory before running B2. Again, make sure the version is correct. In the future it can be 1.4.6 or 1.4.9 or whatever. I resume when it finishes. The build has finished and I only have 64-bit libraries for the correct version 1.4.3. I will set up my Visual Studio for Boost dependency next. I want to have any header which requires Boost in my header file so my build will fail. I will include the server header. When I build it, I can see Boost-related error at the very bottom. Right-click on the project and properties. Here I need to set the boost folder. Here I need to set the libraries folder. Boost has printed all the directories for me. I will be using the libraries directory from my command prompt. This is the headers directory which I already included. This is the libraries directory. I repeat the same for my test console application. I am using a semicolon to separate those directories. Visual Studio knows where to find Boost and I completed the project dependencies. Let's see if it builds. It still does not build because I did not add the copied files to my project. I was reminding myself a lot about this issue. It's finally time to add those files. Right-click on header files and add existing items. I am browsing to my project directory and selecting all the files I copied into it previously. I do not need to add those two examples into my library. One small issue to take care of for my includes those located in simple web server directory. Build is still failing. Why? Why can't it find my library? I will go into the release directory to ensure the library is there. It is not. The library needs to have some methods and import and export directives. Let me add some dummy code just to build the library file. The library file is back. And the solution is built. The test application should run HTTP server. I will go over its code once again. This code is very simple. I create a server instance on port 8080. Define post and get routes. This will start the server in its own thread. This payload will be sent with post request. This will send get request and this will send post request. This line will wait for the server thread to finish, which will not happen, but I can use Ctrl C to terminate the server. Server is listening on port 8080. Get request was successful. Post request was successful. Ctrl C to terminate. But I cannot use Ctrl C to terminate the server in my Unreal Engine plugin. And since this server is ASIO HTTP server, there should be a stop method available. I will quickly test is again. Press enter to exit this console application. And the code is working as expected.